want to talk for a few moments about 10 key decisions that taken during the Second World War that guide the war. These are decisive moments, turning points, if you will. The Nazi-Soviet non-aggression pact of August 39 is responsible for unleashing the war. Without this pact, it's difficult to see what Hitler would have done next. This secures neutrality for the Soviets, allows Poland and Eastern Europe to be divided among the Nazis and the Soviets, allows Hitler to turn his full attention to the West, allows Stalin to rebuild the Red Army. This is the key moment that allows the war to begin. A second key decision is the British decision to fight on. You should remember, for a solid year, the British are fighting Hitler by themselves. The Soviets aren't involved yet, the Americans aren't involved yet, and the British willingness to endure the Blitz, the Battle of Britain, and to fight on is key, because Britain, of course, the British Isles, will become the base upon which the United States and the other allies will station their troops and train them to prepare for the Normandy invasion in 1944. Another key decision is Hitler's decision to attack the Soviet Union in June of 1941. The immediate results of this, of course, is the near collapse of the Soviet Union. The long-term results, of course, are the destruction of Nazi Germany. The Soviet Red Army by far kills more Germans than all the other allies put together. Another key decision, the Japanese decision to strike south instead of striking west and north against the Soviet Union. The Japanese strike south and east against the United States and the British. This, of course, allows Stalin to withdraw troops from Siberia, bring them to the Western Front against Hitler's armies. Mussolini's decision to attack Greece, this, of course, is going to be a hindrance to the Germans. Hitler's going to have to bail Mussolini out of this situation. This delays the start date for Operation Barbarossa by about a month, I believe. And this could have been decisive in the war with Russia. Another decision, or a non-decision, is Stalin's non-response to the Nazi buildup on the Western or on the Soviet frontier. Stalin hoped very much that this German buildup was not against him, and this wishful thinking led him to leave his country exposed to the massive attack that will come in June of 41. Another decision I should make note of is FDR's decision to wage undeclared war in the North Atlantic against the German Navy. Not only this, but I should mention further that FDR is battling against a long-running tradition in this country of isolationism. This is part of American exceptionalism, which we discussed earlier. Isolationism is this notion that the United States should not become involved in European affairs. The American people were very disappointed by the outcome of World War I, and FDR knew perfectly well they had no intentions or no desire to get involved in another European war. So he is very carefully, the president is very carefully trying to lead the American people slowly but surely into a war that he knows that we're going to have to become involved in. And he begins to wage war in the North Atlantic, sinking German submarines and aiding the British as best he can. FDR declared that the United States would be the arsenal of democracy. That is, we would supply our allies, the Soviets and the British, with war materiel in order to fight the Germans. He also declared the policy of Lend-Lease, whereby we would essentially give to the British naval vessels in order to continue to fight the war against the Germans. So FDR is working behind the scenes here, trying to bring the United States slowly into the war, knowing that it's inevitable that we will become involved. The Japanese decision to go to war against the United States and the British in late 41 in December Remember that the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor is designed to knock the United States out of the Pacific. The American aircraft carriers are based at Pearl Harbor. Fortunately for the West, none of the carriers were at port. And the Japanese brought the United States into the war without destroying our capacity to wage it. The Japanese decision, of course, is contingent upon their desire to dominate East Asia, knowing that this can only happen if the United States is removed. The United States' relationship with China, of course, is a hindrance to the Japanese ambitions, as the Japanese want to dominate China as well. So this decision to attack the United States in 1941 is merely the tip of the spear. The Japanese also attacked Southeast Asia, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Japanese armed forces will extend all the way to Burma. So this attack south as opposed to an attack on the Soviet Union, this desire to rid the Pacific of U.S. influence, these are key decisions by the Japanese. Following the attack on Pearl Harbor, just a few days later, Hitler declares war on the United States. Another key decision. To this day, we have not divined exactly what Hitler was thinking. This may have simply been a matter of hubris. He may have felt that the Soviet Union was on the verge of collapse, and he was going to support his ally, the Japanese, in their assault on the United States. At any rate, Hitler's decision to declare war on the United States made President Roosevelt's job easier. Now Roosevelt did not have to coax the American people into war. The Japanese brought them directly into the war, and now Hitler has gratuitously brought the Americans into the European war. Another key decision, and one we'll talk about in more detail, is the decision by Hitler to destroy the Jewish people of Europe. The Holocaust, in a military sense, is a great diversion of manpower, of war material, of expertise, resources that would have been better spent fighting the Russians or the Allies as opposed to killing the Jews. Now, from this, I want to talk for a few moments about the Holocaust. The context for the Holocaust is World War II. Let's face it, it's difficult to murder 6 million people unless you have some large diversions, and the Second World War provides the cover for Hitler to carry out this incredible atrocity. Another context for the Holocaust, one historian made the argument that the Holocaust represents the Enlightenment at its height. This seems counterintuitive at first glance, but the more you consider it, it makes a certain amount of sense. The Enlightenment says that we can progress from generation to generation. We can solve problems with our brain power. We don't have to depend upon the church and superstition to solve problems anymore. That we are an intelligent species. And the Enlightenment puts forward the idea that once you identify a problem, you can devise methods to solve it. And Germany and Hitler identified the problem, did they not? The presence of Jewish people in Europe. And then they devised a solution to the problem, the Holocaust. So this is a controversial context, but nevertheless it's one that you should think about critically. Significances of the Holocaust, I'll give you 3. First, the simple murder of 6 million people is in and of itself significant. I want you to remember that the Nazis had comprised a list of about 11 million Jews living in Europe. Names, addresses. That was their goal. They got 6 million. That's over 50%. You do that in baseball, you go to the Hall of Fame. So the systematic destruction of the Jews, some historians call it industrial killing, whereby the death camps are almost like factories. Their products, of course, are corpses, and that's how we measure success in the Holocaust. A second significance for the Holocaust is the diaspora of the Jews. Diaspora is a fancy word meaning to scatter or to disseminate. Those Jews who could afford to, of course, fled Europe after Hitler came to power. Ironically, many of them came to the United States, some of them German Jewish physicists who helped the United States develop the Manhattan Project, or the first atomic weapon that we originally thought would be used against the Germans. The third significance of the Holocaust is the creation of the State of Israel. Israel was declared in 1947 or 48, just a couple of years after the Second World War. The Holocaust had created a remarkable amount of sympathy for the Jews, and it was hoped that the creation of the State of Israel would provide them a nation of their own whereby they could defend themselves so that such an atrocity would never happen again. A couple of key terms from the Holocaust. You should be aware of the Wannsee Conference, and you'll get the spelling. The Wannsee Conference takes place in January of 42. Here, high-level Nazi officials from the various bureaus and departments gather at Wannsee, which is just a suburb of Berlin, and they work out the technical details of how to round up, transport, and murder 11 million people. This is obviously going to require some logic, some managerial techniques. Chemists are involved, managers are involved, the railroads are involved, the military. We've got to coordinate this huge effort to murder millions of people so that it doesn't look like a giant bar fight. It's a systematic and industrial killing. Beside Wannsee, I want you to be familiar with the term selection. Jews are constantly being selected at each step along the way. Selected for immediate death on the one hand, or a brief period of extended life on the other, whereby they will simply be worked to death or worked until they're so sick that they can then be disposed of in the gas chambers. Selections take place at every level. From the initial arrest to the various camps, work camps, death camps. Again, remember the Nazis are fighting a two-front war by 1944, and they're not going to waste any labor at all. So if you appear to be healthy, if you appear to be still spry and maybe with a bit of muscle tone, you will survive a little longer because they intend to work you to death. If you're sick, lame, blind, pregnant, young, old, you can expect to be selected for immediate execution. I'm just going to mention a couple of solutions, or not solutions, but explanations that have been put forward for the Holocaust. Probably the most controversial is Yehuda Bauer, a Jewish scholar, who made the argument that the Holocaust proves that God is either omnipotent or he's just, but that he cannot be both. If he was omnipotent, he would have stopped the slaughter of innocent people, but he didn't. If he were just, he would have wanted to stop the slaughter of innocent people. So he's either just and very weak and simply unable to stop it, or he's all-powerful and he didn't stop it, which makes him a little better than Satan. And is indeed the source of all evil. This, of course, is a terribly controversial argument. The standard Christian response to this argument, of course, goes back to free will, God granting us free will to do good or evil. This is the only explanation I'm going to get into here. The Holocaust is a terribly complex and tragic episode in world history. I can recommend some excellent films that you can take a look at. Roman Polanski's film, The Pianist, highly recommended. Of course, Schindler's List by Steven Spielberg. The Reader with Kate Winslet, an excellent film. You can YouTube documentary footage of the Holocaust and take a look at how people are reduced to abstractions, and then from abstractions to corpses. So we'll stop there with the Holocaust. Thank you.